Okay, we are live in Facebook land. Awesome. So say good day to David, everybody. David is from down in Melbourne.
Hey, everyone.
South of the border in lockdown.
Yes, that's right.
which is what's going on at the moment down there. Has it affected you much down there?
Look, definitely it depends on the industry. It's a bit hit and miss. I've got some clients that are performing really well from it, some that are just kind of skating through the middle, and then some that have been hit tremendously hard. So very mixed bag.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, isn't it? Pretty crazy times. So if you're in the Business Brain Food group, you are getting early access to this content, which is awesome. Let me know that you can hear us okay. I'll just go in there and double check everything is working fine. I'm pretty sure it will be. I can see people starting to tune in already, which is good.
It's a bit hit. I've got some clients.
There we go. This definitely is us. All right. So that's all working. Fantastic. So if you are live in the Business Brain Food podcast group, you get early access to this content and you're free to ask questions at any time during the chat. I'll do my best to monitor those over there. So if I'm looking over there, David, that's what I'm doing. And if I see your question and I think it's a good one, I'll ask it. How good's that?
Yeah, nice.
And so you're welcome to tune in live. And that's one of the benefits of being in the Facebook group is you get early access and a bit of behind the scenes as well as to what's going on here. All right, David. So are you ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, mate. So I'm going to hit record. You can do that pre-intro when you're ready.
Perfect. Hi, this is David Jenyns, and I'm the author of a book called SYSTEMology, Create Time, Reduce Errors, and Scale Your Profits with Proven Business Systems. And you're listening to the Business Brain Food podcast.
Perfect. Thank you, mate. All right, you guys are in for a real treat today. As you've just heard, David is the author of SYSTEMology. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, SYSTEMology. That's it.
And you've got your own podcast as well. So we love a good podcaster because you have awesome audio.
Yes. Yep. I run a podcast called Business Processes Simplified, and we just interview people, have them share their systems and processes from business, and then we document them and turn them into processes that you can swipe and deploy.
Perfect. All right. So we're going to get started. I'll do my intro and then I'll bring you on and then let's have a chat about all things David Jenyns, eh?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, welcome back to the Business Brain Food podcast. This, my friends, is the podcast that is 100% devoted to taking you and your business to the next level. The good news is, doesn't matter whether you're just brand new to this business thing, so maybe just scratching that entrepreneurial itch, or maybe you're like myself and you've been in business for a long, long time and you've got the scars and the wounds to prove it. No matter what, there's always something new we can do to take our business to the next level. And today is absolutely no different. Today, I'm going to be joined by David Jenyns, all the way from Victoria. He's the author of SYSTEMology, and we are going to be talking a bit about his entrepreneurial journey. Now, before I bring David onto the show, I wanted to remind you that today's podcast episode is brought to you by maxmyprofit.com.au. The team at Max My Profit help you build the business you imagine. So if you went into business imagining something that was more fun, maybe it made you more money or gave you the time and freedom to do the things that you love in life, but instead you've got a big ball and chain that holds you back, that makes you unhappy, then you need to talk to the team at maxmyprofit.com.au and they'll help you build the business that you imagined. Once again, thanks for tuning into the Business Brain Food podcast. If you do enjoy the show, leave an honest review or rating in your favorite podcast player. We do read them all. We love to get your feedback. And of course, if you are in the Business Brain Food group on Facebook, you're getting early access to this content. And if you're not, if you're listening to this on a podcast player and you'd like to get early access, simply head across to facebook.com, look for the Business Brain Food group and come and join over 1,000 entrepreneurs having a good old chat. And currently you're missing out. So you want to make sure that you do that. All righty. So today's guest is David Jenyns. As I mentioned before, David successfully systemized himself out of his business. So it's always interesting to hear from people that have done this themselves. He's not just talking the talk, he's actually walked the walk. His business was one of Australia's most trusted digital agencies, and that's melbourneseoservices.com. He hired a CEO and he stepped back from the daily operations, and through this process, he became a systems devotee, founding Systems Hub and SYSTEMology. And today, his mission is to free all of you worldwide from the daily operations of running your business. So welcome to the Business Brain Food podcast, David.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the episode. I love an Australian podcast.
How good is it, eh? We were just talking about that before I hit record. And for those of you non-podcasters, one of the very big challenges that we're faced with is international time zones, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, definitely. Early starts and late evenings, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Mate, I want to wind the clock back a little bit because I've got on my notes here and I've got to find out that it says in here, your journey began in your early 20s when you sold Australia's most loved sporting ground. And sorry for those of you that are international, because this won't won't make any sense to you. But for those of you that are Aussies, you sold the Melbourne Cricket Ground in your 20s. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I do love telling the story to the Aussies because they all sit up in their chairs and move to the front to listen. But then I have to explain it for the overseas audience listeners that the MCG, it's almost like a religious icon here in Australia. Like we love our sport, and effectively the MCG is like the church for the sport. So I happened to read a book just when I left school called The 1 Minute Millionaire, and it told this story of a guy called Paul Hartunian who sold the Brooklyn Bridge, and he sold it for 1995. And what had happened was he saw on the news they were doing some renovations on the Brooklyn Bridge. They pulled apart all of the wood, and they had this big pile. And then in the background of the shot of someone getting interviewed on the news was the removal truck, and it had the phone number. And he had this great idea. He called them up and he said, "What are you going to do with all that discarded wood?" And they said, "Oh, well, look, we're just going to take it to the tip." And he said, "Well, how about I give you $100 and you deliver it round to my place?" So they said, "Yeah, no worries." They delivered it round, and he chopped it all up into little pieces and then wrote a press release. New Jersey man sells the Brooklyn Bridge for 1995. And he was mobbed by the media for pretty much the next 12 months on, all of the different news channels and newspapers and radio, all the rest of it. And I just read this story in the 1 Minute Millionaire, and here I was driving past the MCG, and they were doing some renovations on the Ponsford stand. Now, the MCG, prior to all of the recent updates, had really well-known, iconic green wooden seating. It was this wooden seating that was painted green, and they also had some very impressive carpet with the MCC, the Melbourne Cricket Club, crested logo on the carpet. So I thought it was almost like fireworks went off in my brain, and I thought, wow, I can replicate this idea here in Melbourne with the MCG. So followed the rabbit hole, went to the wreckers, got my hands on a whole bunch of discarded wood, wrote the press release. Melbourne man sells the MCG for $24.95. I ended up running, it was almost like an advertorial in the MX magazine, which is a free magazine that they give out on the public transport. And then it got, and I sent out press release, and it just got picked up. I was on the Today Show. I was on Nova Radio. I was like newspapers, TV, and it just kind of went wild for me for a little while there. And then I even got it listed on a website called thewishlist.com.au, where they basically, what I'd done is I took all the wood, chopped it up into little pieces, went down to Officeworks, got myself some certificate paper, stuck the piece of wood to the certificate paper, inserted a bit of like a photo of the MCG, and then sold it for $24.95. And then my upsell was basically a $900 frame with the MCC carpet in it, with a full piece of the wood. And after I ran that ad, I just got mobbed by all of the media. And then when it got listed on wishlist.com.au, because back in the day, they used to send all of their orders through the fax machine. I had that fax machine run non-stop for 48 hours, order after order after order after order. It's to the point where, I'd have to quickly stop to change the roll to get the fax paper updated so I wouldn't lose any. And I'd drop a few orders that they'd have to keep reading through. So it was... That's how I got started in business, actually. So I love telling that story.
That's incredible, isn't it? And where it really started for you was reading a book.
Yes, 100%.
I hear this from so many entrepreneurs is that, what does Charlie Tremendous Jones say? He says the difference between you now and the difference between 5 years are the books you read and the people you meet.
Yeah.
And so would you say that book changed your life?
I feel like that was one of the key moments that kind of really shaped. Like I was consuming a lot. My dad was big into sort of multi-level marketing and Amway. So from a young age, like at around that 16, 17, I was listening to Tape of the Month, where you'd have, people like Charlie Tremendous Jones and all the rest of it, just getting you all pumped up and making you feel 6 feet tall and bulletproof. So I had a little bit of that programming, which gave me the confidence. And then I read the book, which then gave me the idea. And then I just thought, follow through, because everybody gets good ideas. Really, the secret is to get the good idea and then to follow through.
Yeah, and I think that is so key, isn't it? Because you're right. Who can sit down and write down a list of 10 things that they could do rather than, one thing that they have done? So important. So before that point in time, what was your trajectory? Had you gone through school thinking you were going to do something else?
I had got to the end of school, so I went to a school called Melbourne High School, and everybody in that school goes to uni afterwards, except for me. I decided that I just wanted to, make money. So I thought, where do I go where the money is? So I took out a big loan. I did one of those weekend learn how to trade the stock market courses and thought I was going to be the next Warren Buffett. And after shortly completing that course, I realized you need money to trade the stock market. And I had a $5,000 debt living with my mum in a two-bedroom flat, and I was stacking shelves at the local supermarket. So I had a little bit of a way to go. That's when the reality kicked in. So I feel like I was probably heading in a different direction, but the whole MCG thing then got me just interested in marketing, and I got interested in some of the direct response stuff. And then that hooked me into early days with the internet. And, when I look at the different businesses I've been involved in, and I look back on them now, they kind of feel a little bit all jumbled up. And but when you're in the moment and you're kind of moving from one thing to the next, it feels like quite a linear order.
Yeah, okay. But when you look back, sometimes we hear stories and I look at people's timelines and go, well, it's all over the place like a pinball. But so you went through school, you decided that obviously you didn't want to go to uni, and you must have had a bit of an entrepreneurial flair. And it sounds like your dad in particular was involved in the whole mindset thing, positive mindset. Maybe your mum was as well, I'm not sure. What was that? Did that play an influence on which direction you ended up going?
Definitely. I think the mindset stuff was huge. And I think about it now, having two young kids myself, just the importance of feeding the brain at such an early age. I don't do it as much as I used to, but I think in my teens, I would have had, my headphones on. I don't know, probably a good 4 or 5 hours a day just listening to different motivational tapes and, all the classics, your Jim Rohns, and we mentioned Charlie Tremendous Jones, and John Burley, and your Tony Robbins, and Brad Sugars, if you're here in Australia. All that sort of programming I got from a very young age. So I'm trying to give that programming to my kids at the moment. They're quite young though, but I have started them on, we'll be playing Lego, and I'll find a little motivational video on YouTube, and I'll have it sitting in the background playing, that they can, overcome any problem that comes their way, and they are going to take over the world. And yeah, it's important to get that early programming.
I agree. And I don't think you can ever start too early, by the way. So that's it's great to hear that you're doing that. So you went on, you sold some parts of the MCG, which was quite innovative and quite. And I can see why the media picked that up. What from there? I mean, what sparked in your belly after that? Where did you head after that, business wise?
So I've had a few things. I definitely started doing more opportunity seeking. So I would jump from one thing to the next. The next big one that really landed, though, while I was working at the supermarket, there was a guy that I was shelf stacking with who owned a clothing store on Bridge Road in Melbourne. And he was working in the clothing store. He was working in the supermarket to earn enough money to pay the wages for the person who was working in his clothing store. So from the get-go, he never wanted to work in the store. He preferred to work outside, and he work in the supermarket because the whole goal was to scale this business. So he thought, well, if I get into the business, I'm never going to really be able to get out. So how about I just start out?
What a
And that's
guy.
yeah, it was amazing foresight, and gave me some tremendous insight, because that's what I see. Most business owners, they get trapped in their business because they start off mastering the skill or knowing how to do the thing. They're the hairdresser who thinks, oh, I can now start the hairdressing business, whereas he thought right from day one. So he had this clothing store, and he saw me do the MCG thing, and he thought, oh, this guy's young and curious and motivated. Maybe we should get into business together. So I joined that business, and we built it up to 3 stores. We opened in a shopping center, and we got one right in the heart of Melbourne. So we had these 3 stores. The last store we actually franchise. So we did all the documentation for the manuals, and we became the franchisor and found our first franchisee. So that was another journey that really kind of opened my eyes to systemizing and building businesses that aren't person dependent, and thinking about scaling. And it's an incredibly challenging business, the retail, let alone rag trade, where when you pay rent and wages before you even open the door, you're significantly behind the eight ball and you've got to earn a lot of cash just to get back to break even. But what it did do is it really just sharpened my knowledge of business and working in, with inefficient vehicles, which means now that, I've been able to relook at the way that I do business, and working online and thinking virtual, and building offshore teams and a lot of these sorts of things now. They are my secret weapon, because I know how to work in a challenging environment. When I stack the deck in my favor, things become a lot easier.
Yeah, and so there's going to be a lot of lessons that we're going to be able to tap into as we go through this chat today, no doubt, because it sounds like you've had a fairly well-rounded business background as well. Having been involved in IT and in innovative or clever ideas, marketing-wise, you've had retail, franchising. So there's you sort of had a bit to do with just about everything, and then of course working with clients as well. I'm sure over the years you've seen a lot.
And the last one that I did where I got kind of stuck, I still kind of kept my foot in the stock market space, and got really interested in. I joined up with a business partner, and we created some home study courses, and that's kind of where I really headed down that. But then they had some changes in the Australian financial law where they required you to have a certain amount of licensing to give what they considered general advice. So my business partner at that point in time said, look, I don't know if I want to head down that path. We kind of wrapped up that part of the business, and I'd built up a significant team where I was handling all of the marketing. My business partner was kind of creating a lot of the content, and I was marketing into the stock market education space. And when I had that team, I thought, what am I going to do now with them? And then I thought, well, if we've been applying all of this smart internet marketing and online marketing to a very competitive space, then it would probably work tremendously well for local business. And that's when we set up Melbourne SEO Services. So we're going back about 15 years ago now. But that was a real interesting journey getting into that digital agency. And that's where I got to work closely with a lot of clients. But I forgot a lot of the things that I knew were important around systemization and removing myself, because I knew how to do the digital marketing. So I became the knight in the shining armor who would solve all of the problems for my staff. I knew how to do the thing. I ended up talking with clients when they were coming on board. And then I came up with these excuses in my head as to why I couldn't systemize. Even though I'd systemized in the clothing store, I'd said, oh yeah, but online's a little bit different. The landscape's always changing. Why do I want to create a system that's going to very quickly become out of date? And I thought to myself, I was going to be the one who had to create all of the systems. And I thought that, it's a real creative space. I didn't want to create systems, and then I would feel like that would remove the creativity in the business. So I had all of this baggage, and that's really what kept me trapped in the business for, I'd probably say, about 7 years too long.
Yeah, okay. And it sounds like the same baggage a lot of people have. So let's dive a bit deeper on that, because I'd love to hear, how did you make that transition? Because 7 years is well and truly created that as your norm, hasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
And that's one of the challenges, right? So people have these habits, or they have their normal, and it becomes very uncomfortable to change. And I think that's why so many people do struggle with this change, to be able to go, well, how do I systemize my business? And you've touched on something there with the creative side. I think a lot of people think that is one of the limitations to them being able to remove themselves from their business, is that they are the creative one, and they're the ones the clients fall in love with, the knight in shining armor, to use your words. So tell me a bit about that transition. I mean, when did you have the epiphany and you needed to do something about it?
Yeah, this is the thing that I'm actually really trying to get down to knickknacks or tic tacs to figure out, how do I replicate what happened to me to other business owners to have that breakthrough? Because the longer you're in it, the harder it becomes to change. For me, the big change was I found out we were pregnant, and I said to myself, I don't want to be that dad who's always too busy, because I was working the really long hours. I was doing the evenings, the mornings. It sounds like I still am with the podcasts these days, but at least there's a bit more flexibility there, and I don't tend to work the weekends anymore. And my life is, I've built this structure in, but it was that I don't want to work ridiculous hours. This is not the life that I wanted to live. I remember my dad, he was He was into that MLM stuff. He always felt like he was working. And while he was home, it just didn't feel like he was present. Like he was just always thinking about business and didn't create that space. So I just thought that's where that change came from and set me on a journey. I'd already sort of read a lot of the books, Traction, Scaling Up, Built to Sell, The E-Myth, of course. And I knew that systems were important. I saw it in the clothing store that we did, and I just thought, right, well, it's time to retest these assumptions. What made me think that it would remove creativity, or that I couldn't systemize because it would get out of date, or I was worried that I'd create the systems and I hadn't created the culture for the team to follow the systems. So I thought, even if I create the systems, are my team even going to follow them? So I started to systematically test all of these things, and I realized, like all of them, they were just conclusions that I'd reached. Maybe I'd given something one little go and it didn't quite work, and then I thought, oh, that's just the way it is. But for example, we mentioned that removing the creativity. The reverse is actually true when you actually test it. If you're in business and you create systems that get all of the mundane, regular stuff that has to happen. So you have to invoice clients a certain way. You have to prepare your financials. You have to pay your wages. You might have to run some sort of ads. There are certain components. The way that you onboard a client, there's probably a way of doing things that have to happen consistently. And if you have a system that makes that happen and gets everybody up to that same standard, it actually frees you up, because now you have the space to think more creatively. You don't have to worry, oh, did I collect that little bit of, that questionnaire that I needed from the client before I get started? Because you just know that it's just done. So that's kind of really what set me on that journey.
Yeah. So do you think, I'm always interested, do you think a lot of people like the notion or idea of not having to work in their business, but when it actually comes to crunch time, the ego or the I guess the recognition of being the knight in shining armor is too hard to give up? Do you think that is what stops a lot of people?
There's definitely a lot of the challenge that the business owner, everything that they've done, as we know, to build up the business to one level, is great to get to them to that first level, but then also holds them back. So they have been so particular with the way that they deliver to clients. They've micromanaged. They've made sure that they're delivering to a particular standard, and that's what's getting them referrals. That's why their business has grown up to where it is. So all of this behavior gets reinforced, and they start to train the staff that if ever you got a problem, just come to me and I can quickly solve it. But then that becomes this reinforcing loop. The business owner gets better at solving problems. The team becomes more dependent on the business owner to solve those problems, and then it gets harder and harder and harder. And then the business owner, for some reason, then falls. It is an ego thing. They think, oh, I'm the guy. Even if we create systems, I'm going to have to be the guy that creates them, or because the business owner thinks that they can do the things within the business better than anyone else, and usually they're the bottleneck. But oftentimes you don't want to try and get out of a problem by using the same method that got you into that problem.
But my business is different. Have you heard that before?
I thought my business was different. I hear it all the time. My business is different. What I actually find is that of all the businesses that we've worked with, when it comes to systemization, the biggest difference is in the operations, which is the delivery of the product and service. But about all the other departments are almost identical. Recruitment, hiring and onboarding, management of staff, lead generation, sales conversion, your HR and your management and your finance, all these departments, there are a set of systems that can actually be quite transferable from business to business. And the business owner just falls into this trap. That the actual secret is it's a shift in culture in the business, and the business owner wants to take themselves out of the process. Like for systemology, and that's what systemology is. It's the system for systemizing a business. It's the system that you get your team to follow. You need to identify the mission critical systems, the handful, it's the 80-20. What are the 20% of the systems that deliver the 80% of the result? And then how do you identify who on your team has that knowledge? And then how do you make it easy for them to get that knowledge out of their head And that's level one. Like, you don't have to have perfect systems. Just figure out who in the team can do it the best, preferably not the business owner, and then get everybody up to that standard. Do that and you'll have tremendous wins.
Yeah, so good. So tell me, one of the things that you mentioned there, you sort of talked about that cycle that people go through where they start a business. I guess their team has this learned helplessness where they come to the business owner, ask all the questions. Not only does that put them in a position of where they feel like they're important and needed, but also makes them very busy. So how does someone go from being very busy, having to fix all the issues, put all the fires out, to also then putting something else on their plate that they have very little knowledge about how to do, so it's hard, and that is systemizing the business. So how do they make that transition?
So the bit that you're speaking to is, there's a few real key lessons in there. One, the business owner is usually the worst person to do the systemization. I think every discussion that I have with the business owner, we always agree that systems are important. I don't think I've ever had a discussion where a business owner that says systems aren't important. The issue is that they're not urgent. The issue is that they go on the business owner's to-do list, and the business owner always has a million things that are more important. Not only that, they don't even like writing systems and processes. In fact, most of them dislike process because they're big picture people. They're creative. They see a problem out in the world and they want to go out there and solve that. They're not minute detail, getting down to tic tacs, writing out processes and then having the team follow through and follow that. So it's a tremendous blind spot for business owners because it's not in their makeup. And they think because it's not in their makeup, that it's not in everybody's makeup, or that their team won't like systems and processes. But just because business owners are different. Oftentimes the visionary founder or, the person who gets it up and running, that's a different person. You'll get to a point where you want to find that yin to your yang. And that, the best person who talks to that is Gino Wickman in his book Rocket Fuel. And he talks about this idea of, he calls them visionaries and integrators. For me, the way that I stepped out, I found my integrator. She was my manager. If you think about Michael Gerber's language, he talks about a leader and a manager. So I was the leader. My Melissa, she was my manager, who I started to put in charge. We kind of worked together, and there were some points where I made myself very vulnerable as a business owner. I said, okay, well, Melissa's in charge. And here I was as the business owner throwing my weight around, thinking that whatever I was working on was more important than anything else and client work. So I'd go to staff and I'd say, oh, I've got this podcast that I'm on next week. I need you to do this nice little graphic for me. I really need you to do it in the next 24 hours. Because I have to have it done. And that for me was the most important thing. And I did that a few times, and it was throwing out client delivery times and getting work done. And I'd put Melissa in charge, and it got to the point where she said, you can't keep doing this. We have a process for the way that work gets delegated. It comes through the system, it gets put into the project management platform, and then it gets assigned out. And then the team leader will have an idea on workload levels and where it can fit in without disrupting promises that we've already made to clients. So she told me this 2 or 3 times, and then I kept on doing it. I would just go round her. I'd effectively have the team member on Slack. I'd send them the direct message in Asana saying, hey, here's the task I've assigned in Asana. Can you jump in and attend to this? And then Melissa wrote this big note on our team bulletin board, tagged everyone in the team and me, and said, next time, now, mind you, I'm the business owner and she is the CEO. She's an employee of the company. She said, next time Dave comes to you with an urgent, you must do this task now, ignore him. Tell him he's not gone about it the right way, and we have a system and a process for the way that we do things here. And for me, as the business owner, that was just like, like that. Who did she think that she was to say that to team members that effectively I was employing? And then I started to realize that that's part of when I started to let go of my ego. And I thought, well, if I can't make her in charge and put her in charge and have the responsibility for the way the business is run, it will always default back to me. So I was just undermining her. So if I wanted her to give me the confidence that she had this, I needed the team to know that I support her decision. And that was another shift. And sometimes it's challenging to find someone who who you have that relationship with, but that, integrator visionary relationship, if you can find that person and cultivate the person, that's a key part of releasing the business owner from those day-to-day operations.
Yeah, and that's a great example. Did you? I mean, at that point in time, did you find that there were times where you just did not get on? I mean, it's very from an entrepreneurial point of view, very usually a strong-willed person as well, not just creative and not liking systems. And there would have been a real risk that you could have just fired her and said, you know what do you know what you're doing, and just got on with it. So how did you manage that emotionally and mentally, mindset-wise, for yourself?
I think from her, she had been recruited from within. She actually was a business partner in the clothing music store. So I'd worked with her previously, and she was a business owner in the previous business. I think one thing I am finding is an operations person, if you are looking for the yin to your yang, one of the best places you can look, there's two little attributes that I like. One, if they were previous business owners, because then they understand the challenges, they understand the pieces and how the departments fit together, and they've got a real respect for how challenging business can be, particularly when you're trying to get something off the ground. So that was one attribute. Another attribute as well, you want to find someone that is very detail and process orientated, and she had that. She built all the systems up for the rock and roll clothing music store. So again, this is where I'm coming back to, how do you find that? I built up that trust over a long period. I think it's quite a challenging position to recruit for externally. To find a rock star, you'll probably pay a very high, 6-7 figure salary to get that person. And then unless you've worked with them over a long period of time, you don't know if they're going to be a success or be able to hit the ground running. So that's also another thing I'm trying to work on. There's a few problems that I'm trying to figure out. How do we shortcut this? How do I have the insight for the business owner that they must systemize, and it's important and it's urgent and they've got to do it now? Like, it's how do I create that? Another piece that I'm trying to solve is, how do you find in the quickest path who that replacement of you is going to be in that day-to-day operations? They're probably the two biggest problems that I'm still working on now. Systemology, the book, solves the where do I start, how do I get the business owner out of it, the process of doing it, how do I make the process easy for the team. So it solves a lot of those problems, but there's still one or two problems that I'm still working on.
Yeah, because I reckon we could ask a show of hands for everyone listening who has tried or has started building systems but then not completed them. And we'd see a fairly large group of people putting their hands up right now. And I think the problem is not because you're not smart, not because you don't know how to develop a system. There are, like you said, your book, there's E-Myth, there's a lot of different books out there that talk about creating systems. But it sounds to me it's more about the fact that maybe you're not the right person to do it. And as soon as you admit that,
that's part of it. So that is one of the key ones. So when I read things like the E-Myth, Traction, Built to Sell, we talked about some of the names earlier. I found all of those books, what they do is they speak to the importance of systems, and they lead you to the conclusion that you need systems. But I always felt that you're high and dry when it's, okay, but how do I do it? Where do I first start? If I am the worst person to do it, who is going to do it? If I'm busy, then chances are your best team members are busy. So how do I make it easy for them? So the systemology, which is a 7-step process, the first one is around define, so that the handful of systems, the 80-20, what are the ones you focus on? The first 10 to 15 systems. Then assign who in your team has the knowledge, preferably not the business owner, as much as possible. Then the next one, the extract, speaks to something that we were kind of just touching on there. Is also, if the business owner isn't great at doing it and we want team members to do it, how do we make it easy? And the big secret, is to make it a 2-person job. You have the person who has the knowledge and you have the person who does the documentation. The person who has the knowledge, you just record them doing the task. You use a Loom, you use a GoPro video, you use an iPhone, just record them doing whatever the thing is. Then take that video and give it to someone else. Get them to watch the video, pull out the key steps, and then that becomes version 1 of your systems. Because everybody loves to edit. No one likes to write from a blank page. So if you go back to the knowledgeable worker and say, we recorded you doing your thing, and now here are the bullet points that I got from what you had said. Have I missed anything? Everybody is happy to help with that. But if you go to someone who is not a systems person and you say, hey, I want you to document your systems and your processes, they're going to go, yeah, well, I'm pretty busy. I've got this client here that needs my attention. I'll get to it, and just like the business owner, they never get around to it. So it's not only is the business owner the worst person, but you also need to think how to make it easy for people who don't necessarily resonate. And then longer term, it is change. You need to change the culture. This is not a one and done type thing. You don't systemize for 3 months and then say, great, I'm now a systemized business. But that's another huge myth that people get hung up on. They look at McDonald's and they say, I need to systemize like McDonald's, because McDonald's is the poster child of business systemization. But McDonald's has been systemizing for 60 years. You don't want to try and systemize like McDonald's is today. You want to systemize how McDonald's did 60 years ago. And it's an iterative process. They have become the absolute beast they are by having this systems-centered culture that is all about improvements, always looking for the systems solution, recruiting team members that fit into that systems solution. Because as you start to make this change, you might find some people may not connect with your new systemized approach. And that's okay. That just means they're opting out. But the biggest resistance always comes from those existing staff. In future, when you're hiring and you have systems in place, that's all that team member has ever known. So if they don't fit, you'll identify that very early in the process, and then you won't actually hire them. So it's once you start on this journey, we're really talking about how do we bridge the gap between being a small team with the business owner at the center of it, to building a team that operates without person dependency. And the bridge to get get over that gap, that's what I wrote Systemology for. And I know we touched on Michael Gerber. He wrote the E-Myth. Michael Gerber wrote the foreword to Systemology, because he's really in support of the work that I'm doing, because it's the extension. It doesn't replace. It's actually all of my programming and all my good stuff around systems comes from his work. So now this is just, I'm filling in the gaps for where I felt things weren't properly addressed, or I didn't get what I needed, and it made it challenging, and also why I got stuck in the business longer than I should have.
It's interesting, because knowing that I was going to chat to you today, yesterday afternoon, I did a Google search on how to systemize your business to see what I could find. And there's actually not a lot there. So yeah. I think you're right. I think you've touched on an area that is weak when it comes to getting help to grow the business. And once again, I'll agree with you that I think a lot of those books highlight the importance to systemize. And I think the risk is that people do look at McDonald's or other systemized business and think that you just create you get this blanket you throw over a business and it's got all these systems in it. But that's a really good distinction that they're 60 years into it. So, how does somebody start then if like you talked about, well, let's go back to your journey. You decided you were going to start, and you were a bit of a pain to your CEO because you were trying to go around the systems all the time. And I could see this happening all the time. And some people wouldn't be as strong as your CEO in stopping that from happening. Some of the team members wouldn't fit. What was the experience for you when you made that transition? Was there a fallout? Was there people left? Did you find that there were certain things you had to do to make sure that it all worked comfortably? Were there clients that got let down? What happened?
A few key things happened in the process. One, we started to celebrate the team members that were looking for the loopholes in the systems. Initially, it was frustrating because I'd have a team member who they would look for ways to game the system or have more time off or claim more that they should or give a project more than they should or those sorts of things. And then we started to use that as a way to improve the systems. So when I found something, it was never a problem with the staff member. It was always a problem with the system. And we looked to the system first. So we used it as a way to improve that. There were 1 or 2 team members that opted out. It took probably about a 6-month period before we realized that it became obvious that they weren't the right fit for where we were going. They got us to where we were, and that was fantastic, but they just weren't the right fit with the next part of the game, and that was okay. I had a really interesting, and this is how I got to know Michael Gerber, a strange opportunity that just fell in my lap. So after I systemized, literally within a month after me going, all right, Melissa, you are now good to go. I feel like we're at a point. Then I get a message out of the blue from a lady called Luz Delia Gerber. Now, I didn't know the first name, definitely knew the surname. And she said, call me. So I picked up the phone. I called her. It was like about 7 a.m. Melbourne time. I knew that Gerber's, they were on the West Coast. So it was their afternoon in the US. And I had a discussion with her and she said, look, I came across the first book that I wrote was a book called Authority Content. And that was for the digital agency. And she'd seen me do that book launch, which was a really successful online book launch. And she said, look, Michael's written the last book in his E-Myth series called Beyond the E-Myth. He's 80 now. This is the final work in his series, and he's thinking about his future legacy. And for the first time, we don't want to go through a traditional publisher. All of our previous books are HarperCollins, but we want to kind of maintain the rights and control over this, just so we can really kind of direct things as, you know, it happens a little bit further down the line. So we want to self-publish this book. And I saw what you did with Authority Content. I loved it. I'd love for you to launch Michael's book. And she said, there's one small catch. You're going to have to work on it full time, and it's probably going to be more than full time. And it's going to be at least 3 months worth of work. And you're going to need to be working pretty much in his business, not in yours. So I felt like that was the universe just opening up to me and saying, here is a chance to see how your business flies without you. So I said, I'll do it and I'll volunteer. I don't want to be paid for this position. I just want the opportunity to work with Michael and be mentored underneath him. And it gave me a great experience where I connected with him. You know, it was such an amazing experience. I had doors. I've never seen doors open quicker than when I say, oh, Michael Gerber, and people would be falling over themselves to interview him or to, you know, have some sort of write-up or whatever the case may be. So it was a great experience. Book ended up getting an Amazon bestseller in 24 hours. And then at the end of the project, I hopped on a plane, flew to the States. I'd called in a couple of favors from some friends to help me in this book launch. So I flew them over as well, and we rented out this amazing house in Carlsbad, California. It was kind of one of these Airbnbs that hung off the rock face overlooking the ocean. And then we attended a 3-day event that Michael calls called the Dreaming Room. And it was one of the last sort of live events that he ran. And then at the end of that, they were going to have a live, it was in his presidential suite. It was a mastermind group to determine the future legacy of his work. So they had the event, and then they had this mastermind, then they invited a whole bunch of who's who. They wanted to have Tony Robbins facilitate it, but they couldn't get a facilitator. So at the 11th hour, I stuck my hand up and I said, I'll facilitate the group. So here I am. I did not know Michael Gerber 4 months earlier. I'm in his presidential suite, facilitating a group of the who's who about the future legacy of his work. And all of that for me was possible because I'd systemized my business to the point where it ran itself and I could take advantage of the opportunity. So that was a huge lesson for me that business owners, most of them, if they had the Oprah of their industry come and knock on their door and say, I would love to work with you, most of them wouldn't be able to take advantage of that opportunity because they're too involved in the business. They'd be like, I can't leave for 3 months. I can't work on someone else's business. And I think that's the biggest thing that systems brings. It gives, it opens the space for opportunity for business owners. It gives them the space. And not only, you may have had, as a business owner, opportunities fall across your lap that you were aware of, but I can guarantee there are probably another 100 for everyone that you can think of that you just didn't see as a business owner because you were too in it and you were working in the business head down and you didn't see just the opportunities flying by. So I'm incredibly passionate now about business systems. And it's not that I like writing detailed processes. In fact, I actually don't like writing systems and processes, but I see the value. They are the most important asset in business, and business owners need to figure out how to master them, whether it's them or their team. They've got to do it, and that is what gives them the opportunity of a lifetime that they can actually take advantage of. But you've got to get your business working to a point where it works without you first.
So good. So good. And I think if that doesn't inspire you right now to get a copy of David's book and work out how to systemize your business, then nothing will. Now, we are just about out of time, David. So how can people find out more, buddy?
Yeah, best place to go, systemology.com/book. They'll be able to get the links through to Amazon and Audible. It is coming out in the it's an audio book. Michael read the forward as well, and he wrote the forward to the book. There's a few Easter eggs in the audio book as well, so it's a pretty fun listen. And I read it myself. But the book comes out, depending on when you listen to this, it comes out August 18, 2020. So yeah, pretty excited for that. And then on the Systemology website, you can find out a bit more about us. There's links through to my podcast and the other bits and pieces as well.
Yeah, plenty of good stuff there. We'll put that all into the show notes. So if you've missed any of that, you can head across to businessbrainfood.com.au. Just search for Systemology, and this podcast will pop up, and you'll be able to click on any of the links. So anything that we've referenced throughout today's chat, there'll be links in there leading you directly there along to David's website and his book. I highly recommend it. Like, I'm such a big fan of systems. It's been great having you on today, mate. And it's so good that it all started with you selling off bits of the MCG.
Thank you for having me. An absolute pleasure.
All righty. Well, if you've enjoyed today's podcast episode, please head across to your favourite podcast player, leave an honest review or rating. We do read them all. We'd love to get your feedback. And just a reminder that today's show was brought to you by maxmyprofit.com.au. The team at Max My Profit help you build the business that you imagine. So if you imagine something that made you more money, gave you more time to do the things that you love in life, but instead you feel like you're chained to something that is a bit, I don't know, yucky and unfun to run, and you'd like some help to get your sales up, systemize your business, or maybe recruit the right people so you don't have to be so busy working in it, then talk to the team at maxmyprofit.com.au, and they'll help you build the business that you imagined. All righty, well, that's it for today's episode. Thanks again for joining us here on the podcast. Thanks to those of you that watched live in the Business Brain Food group. And on that final note, I will say that if you're not in there, you are missing out on a fantastic community of entrepreneurs. So head across to Facebook and look for the Business Brain Food group. I've been Ben Futrell. You've been listening to David Jenyns talk about his new book, Systemology, and how to go about systemizing your business so it relies less on you. Until next week, have a profitable day. See ya. There we go, David. Thank you very much, buddy.
Pleasure. Thank you. That was great.
All right, I'm going to finish up the live stream now. Thank you for those of you that are in there with the thumbs up. Nice to see you in there.